Today we're going to be making meat pie. This is a traditional French-Canadian Quebecois recipe, and in order to really bring you something authentic, I brought someone special along, my mom. She's been making this recipe my entire life. She got it from her mom, who got it from her mom. So this is something that's been passed down through the generations, and we wanted to show you how to make traditional Tourtiere pie. This is absolutely incredible.
So I should mention that when my son was young, instead of calling this Tourtiere pie, he called it Tourtiere pie. At that time, he did not enjoy the pie. Now it's one of his favorite meals. Typically, the French Canadians would have this at midnight for their réveillon. It would be the main course of that meal.
And what's réveillon?
Réveillon would be the traditional French Canadian full dinner that is served at midnight.
On Christmas Eve?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this is a traditional Quebecois Christmas Eve dinner, and we're gonna take you through the steps to make it. We'll take you through the filling, we'll take you through the pie crust, and then of course, there's gonna be a little competition in this video. My mom's gonna be doing it traditional style, baking it in the oven, and I've got something up my sleeve that I think might take this pie to the next level. Okay, we'll be taking you through the ingredients here, and because we're gonna be making 2 meat pies, we're doubling the recipe. So if you just wanna make one, have the ingredients that we're talking about here in the video, and you'll be good to go.
So typically, the French Canadian Tourtiere is made with all pork. Because of the amount of fat that is in pork, we're doing half pork and we're doing half of the beef. The amount of each is going to be 1.5 pounds of the pork, 1.5 pounds of the beef. We're going to add to that 2 cups of chopped onion, 1 cup of water. Because these bay leaves vary in size, rather than 2, we're going to put in 4. And we'll have 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of thyme, half a teaspoon of cloves, and half a teaspoon of pepper. Okay, so next we're going to prepare the onion, and we need 2 cups of diced onion.
Now you want to make sure this is finely chopped.
So right now you're going to put in the meat, 1.5 pounds of pork, 1.5 pounds of hamburger. And you're going to add 2 cups of finely chopped onion. Now you're going to add 1 cup of water. Doubling the recipe, it calls for 2 bay leaves. Because there's variety in the size of the bay leaves, we're putting in 4. Next would be 3 teaspoons of salt. Next is 1 teaspoon of thyme, half a teaspoon of cloves, and half a teaspoon of pepper. Good. What you're going to do is now put all of the ingredients on a medium-high temperature and mix everything. Make sure that you break the meat up well, and you continue doing that until there's no longer any redness to either the hamburger or the pork. It's important when you're mixing this that you break up the meat so there are no chunks left. Yes, you do want to mix it, but also equally important is that you do not have any chunks of meat remaining. And this will take some time. You can see already that there is some change in color, but this is only the beginning.
So we've got some small potatoes just from a local farmer here, and we're just gonna peel these and then chop them into small pieces because we're gonna be making mashed potato out of these.
And so by chopping them small, you reduce your cooking time. The other thing, as you peel them, make sure that they're put immediately into cold water, otherwise they will discolor. And when you cook the actual potato, I add hot water and salt. And make sure your water comes up level with the top of the potato.
Okay, we're gonna turn this on to medium-high, then we're gonna add some salt, put the lid on, and once this comes to a boil, then we'll turn it down to low and just let it simmer away. Now we'll go back to our beef and pork mixture and just keep stirring that periodically just to make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom.
So at this point you can see that the redness is out of both the pork and the hamburger. The other difference that you would notice is there is quite a bit of moisture in there now, certainly more than when we started. So the moisture from both of the meats has been released. At this point, you do not have to be concerned. You do not have to stir it for the next 45 minutes. But you will put the lid on and you will reduce the heat. So what we're going to do is turn the temperature from a medium high down to a mid simmer, and it will stay there for 45 minutes and cook. All right, so the potatoes have been on. It sounds like they're boiling. Let's do a check. Yes, they are boiling. Now we can reduce the heat. Because they're so small, they should be ready in 10 minutes. So it looks as though the potatoes may be done. Let's do a check. You're going to take a knife, insert it into one of the potatoes, and it went in very smoothly. That means your potatoes are done. Time to drain and mash.
So this has been simmering away for 45 minutes, and you can see it's fully cooked through here now. So what we're gonna do is remove the bay leaves from this. Now before we add the mashed potatoes to this mix, we're just gonna tilt it to the side like this, and we're gonna wanna scoop out some of this juice here, which has a lot of the fat from the meat in it. So we've scooped this all out, but we've left that amount of juice here in the bottom. We want a little bit left in just for flavor, obviously, but we don't want it to be overwhelming because we don't want the pie to be runny. Now we're just gonna mix in the mashed potato. Now we'll just mix this all together. So now that we've got this all mixed up, we're gonna let it cool down. You don't wanna put the hot mixture into your pie dough. So we're actually gonna let this cool down overnight. You don't have to let it go overnight, but that's what we're doing in this case. We'll make the pie crust, and then we'll actually build the pies tomorrow and take you through that. Okay, we're back. It's the next morning. Now it's time to actually make the crust for our pie. And we've got all the ingredients we need here, and we're gonna go in with 6 cups of just all-purpose flour, 1 pound of lard, 1 egg. We've got a tablespoon of white vinegar. We'll need about a teaspoon of salt, and we're just using kosher salt here. So we're gonna mix that into a mixing bowl here, and then we'll knead that together. My mom's gonna tell you how to know when you're done mixing, and so you don't overmix or mix too little and it's the right consistency. Okay, so let's get these ingredients in the bowl.
So the recipe that we're going to use is a pie crust recipe that we've used for a number of years. It's considered a no-fail recipe, and we attribute that to the 1 tablespoon of vinegar that goes in. My preference is always to use tender flake. I find it makes a flakier crust.
But as you can see, this recipe has been used once or twice before. These are just pages out of my mom's recipe book, and they're all stained with the ingredients, as you might imagine.
We'll add tender flake. I find this works better than a pastry blender. You get a real feel for what areas are mixed and what are not mixed. Make sure that your tender flake is at room temperature so it's nice and soft and pliable.
So we've just started to mix the ingredients here. We've got 5 cups of flour, and even though the recipe calls for 6, we're gonna start with 5 because when we're kneading the dough, putting it out, forming our pie shells, we're gonna have some extra flour on the surface of the countertop that will build up the texture of the crust that we're looking for. So we've just got the flour and the tender flake in. We're just kneading the dough until it gets to the right texture right now.
And the texture is coming along quite well. By using your hand, you can ensure that all of the flour is mixed in. There are no lumps from the tender flake. A lot of people use a pastry maker. I find the hand works the best. So the texture of our pastry is very workable at this point. We're now going to add the rest of the ingredients. So, time to add the egg. Egg first.
Oh, the egg first. I'm getting lost around here. Okay,
the egg
perfect.
First. And now 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And I go a little on the healthy side with the vinegar. Don't worry about being too precise. There we go.
A little extra splash.
Sure, yeah, for good luck. There you go. And then you take your fork now and whip that up, ensuring that you've broken the yolk and it becomes somewhat frothy. So now you're going to fill it up with water up to 1 cup.
All right.
Now, let's get some salt in there too. A generous teaspoon. Okay, away we go. That's good. So now you can see it's much more pliable than it had been with just the tender flake and the flour. It's really coming together. We do need to add a little extra flour. It's too wet at this point, even with flour on your counter. If you were to put that down, it's still going to stick. Okay, that's good. We'll mix that in, see what kind of difference it makes. Now it's becoming a little bit stiffer. And see, it doesn't stick quite the same to my hand. We'll take a little more flour. Okay, and so you can see over here, the way it's holding together better than over here. So when I was mixing this previously, when you're bringing what's on the bottom to the top, you get the wetter part. So make sure when you're mixing this in, you're incorporating all of the flour from top to bottom and sides. So now you can see that we actually have a workable dough. It's not stuck together, it's actually splitting a little bit, it's drier, so it's more manageable. It's not going to stick to your counter. This is ready to go. We're going to be making, first of all, the base shell for our Tourtiere pie.
So now, before we actually put the dough or the pie crust out on the countertop, we're just going to lay down a little bit of flour like this. This recipe is going to be enough to make crust for 2 pies, and we're using 9-inch pie plates, so we'll have more than enough for the little competition we have going on here. So I'm going to let my mom go first.
For the base, certainly it's going to take more dough than it is for the top crust. Make sure that you have plenty, okay? Otherwise, if it's not large enough and going over the edges, you have to start over. Okay, so you make it into a ball, put it down on the flour, give it a push. You're going to take more flour and you're going to flour your roller. Okay, and this roller, I should mention, has been in the family for about 70 years. Well used, still works very well. Now, when you're rolling out your dough, make sure you're attempting to have it in a circular motion. You don't want to have a square piece of dough. Okay, so it is very thick, it is very pliable. We're getting there. And you can see it is not cracking, okay? Which indicates that you've got not too much flour, you've got the right amount in there. At this point, it looks as though we have sufficient dough for a 9-inch pie. Some people take their roller and do the pastry on that to transfer. I just fold it in half and then fold it again into quarters. Then you bring your pie plate in, over we go. And so you're just going to move that around until you're satisfied with the fit. Especially on the base, we do have a little section here which is not joined, which is not an issue, okay? Just push it down and join it in. That's not going to show. And when it cooks, it will seal together. Make sure that you have plenty of dough in the center and around the edge. Pat it in. Okay, you don't want any air between the glass and the pastry. Now we're ready to put the meat in.
So now we're just going to add the filling to this one. So we're going to use about half of the filling that we made yesterday. I'm just going to pat that in.
Now the next thing we have to do is make the top layer of that pie. We will have a lesser amount, certainly, than we used for the base, but it's still important to ensure that you have a size large enough that it will fit. All right, here we go. And very quickly, the flour is coming off of the roller, but nothing is sticking. So far, so good. We don't need even more than what we have. I would say that is good. So now we're going to do the same as we did for the base. You're folding it in half, and you can see we had plenty of flour. It didn't stick. Fold it again in quarters, and we'll put the crust on here. When you open this up, put it halfway across your pie and unfold it. And this is going to work fine. Give it a little push around the edges to make sure your top is joining with your base all the way around. All right. So now we're cutting off the excess pastry. Just take a sharp knife. Make sure your knife is touching the glass part of your dish, your pie plate. Keep going all the way around. So this is the excess pastry that has just come off from this pie. take into consideration when you're making your second pie that this should be part of your base, not part of your top. Because it's been worked once already, it has extra flour in it, it may be more likely to split or crack, which is not an issue on the bottom. It would be on the top. And now we're going to put the edging on. I take a finger, the thumb and finger of the other hand, and we go all the way around the pie like this. And so it's important when you're doing the edging that you're pushing down with this finger as you go. And again, it's to seal the top and bottom layers. Makes a good edging. What we're also going to be doing next is putting an opening on the top. You want to ensure that when your tourtière or any pie is cooking, that you actually have an out for the air that accumulates. So this is a design that my mother, my grandmother both used, and it's somewhat decorative. You may like it for presentation. It more or less gives the impression of a branch and then just dots as you go along, going right through the pastry, so any air on the inside can be released. And there you have it. So it's important when you cook your tourtière pie that you have a preheated oven. You're going to go to bake. Start it at 425 for 15 minutes.
So now I'm just gonna try and make the base and the top for my pie too. So I'm gonna try the other method here of rolling the dough over your pin like that, bringing in the pie plate and going back over it like here. I think that was actually a little easier, Mom. So now I'm just making sure there's no air pockets between the plate and the pie crust. Boom! Now I will do the top. Now we're just gonna put in the rest of our tourtière mixture. We'll break this up and spread it around. So I'm not packing this as tightly as we packed the other one. This one's gonna be a little bit looser, and we'll see what kind of difference that makes. And make sure your meat is packed all the way to the side of the pie. And now we'll transfer the dough on the pin again. Now we're just gonna make sure that the top of the crust is actually pressed into the base. So I was told we're not supposed to have all this flour on the surface, so we'll just brush that off here with a little, not a pastry brush, but we actually use this for basting our ribs. Boom, look at that. Now we're just gonna make the crust. My crust doesn't look anywhere as good as your crust. All right, now to see if I can do my mom's design here, which I doubt I'll do anywhere as well. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm just gonna go with 3. Boom! So I just wanted to show you the difference between the expertly done pie and my butcher job over here. Or this one's gonna go in the oven. I'm gonna put this on the Kamado. I've got it heated up to 425, and we'll see if barbecuing a tourtière pie makes any difference versus the oven. So now we're just gonna pop in our pie right in the middle here, and we'll check back in a half an hour.
So we're going to check our pie, see how things have gone for the first 15 minutes. Certainly is coming along, but there's a long way to go. So we're going to reduce the heat now, and we're going to go down to 350. However, we'll check it in 15 minutes and see what it looks like. You do need a brownish color to the pastry.
Okay, we've had this at 425 for a little over a half an hour. And look at that, it's all browned up. The crust, I think, is ready to go. So we'll take this inside. You can smell the barbecue in that.
You're pleased with your job, you should be.
All right, the 2 pies are done cooking, and we're gonna bring my dad in here to do the official taste test. He's been eating these pies for decades, and we'll see how my pie over here that was done out on the Kamado compares to this pie over here that was done in the oven. All right, so this is my dad, and he's gonna be the taste tester. He's already set out a bunch of dimensions that he's gonna measure the pies against one another on. Now it's time to start the judging.
First of all, I'm gonna cut a piece out here part of the critical component in my view of a pie is how easily it cuts and how well it stays together. I might just like to add that I have over 45 years experience. Look at that. Oh, very nice. Perfect wedge of pie, stayed together, nothing flowed down over the plate. Right on. Now moving on to the second pie, we'll do the same thing. Oh, cuts very nice. We'll see how this wedge does. It's coming out good. Same thing. I'm testing this smell between the two pies. Obviously the one that's been done in the barbecue has a smoky charcoal smell to it. Very evident even without cutting out the wedge that was coming off the crust. On this one here, as I said earlier, because of 45 years of experience with this kind of tourtière, this to me smells what I'm used to. So what I'm rating in each pie is on a scale from 0 to 1. And I'm going to rate this one as a 0.8 and this one as a 1, only because this is what I'm used to as far as the smell. That's not saying that the smell of this takes away from it at all. Very nice. It'll be interesting to see how the barbecue influences the taste, specifically the taste of the crust. The next category that these two pies are being judged on is the actual shape of the wedge of the pie that we took out. As you could see when we actually did it, this one came out in a near perfect shape. There was a little piece of crust that was missing from the front, but it's sitting flat. There's no sagging on the sides or anything. For that reason, I'm giving it a 1. This one here, 2 reasons, didn't have as much meat as the first pie. So it sits differently on the plate, and some of the crust from the bottom stayed behind when I lifted it out. So it just doesn't present as pretty a picture when you put it on a plate. So I'm giving it as a 0.7. I'm going to take a taste of it. These have cooled sufficiently that I can cut right in. Make sure I get a good mixture of crust and the actual pie filling, the meat filling. Very, very good. Very, very good. And we'll do the second one, made and cooked by Mom. And again, you want to get a good ratio of actual crust to filling, so you get that contrast. It looks like in both of these, the crust is as flaky and as tasty as the other one. Very good. I would say when it comes down to how to judge the difference between these two pies in taste would be just a personal preference on whether you like to have it with that smoked barbecue flavor with it, or would you just rather have it come straight out of the oven like that. So I'm going to rate those on the taste component a tie. So now we're just going to do the crust. On the barbecue one, just looking at the crust here, we'll get a piece without any filling. Try and get a good generous taste of it. So it's not only just the taste, but the texture of the crust on your mouth. Very good. I probably should have 3 or 4 more tastes of that one. This crust is a little drier. So you can see on the crust here, and there's sections, what you're looking for ideally is this like 7 or 8 inch strip of crust here, and the brown spots here have been done perfectly. But then when we get around here, and the same thing on this side, where it's a darker crust, the crust is drier to the taste. The crust on top of the actual meat is very well done. A little bit darker than the other pie, but in overall a little drier crust on that. So I would rate the barbecued pie higher in this case. So folks, we've come down to the final moment here where we've totaled up the score in the various categories for the 2 pies, and it's extremely close. It's almost, if we went back and rejudged it. But anyway, out of a total of 6 points, the pie that was barbecued scored a 5.2, and the oven pie was scored a 5.0. So we have a winner on this side here at 5.2.
Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a like below, consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for tuning in, folks.